Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel for another painting video from the Warhammer 40,000 Imperium magazine. This week we are looking at painting one of the assault intercessors that we got with issue 3, and you can check the magazine review for that out up in the corner there. So, colour choice or chapter choice for this particular model this week is going to be Ultramarines. Why? Because that is what the magazine focuses on, and it's one of the easier chapters to paint, or for new beginners tend to lean a little bit more towards Ultramarines. So I figured the first Space Marine chapter that we'll show will be an Ultramarine. The remaining models that we'll get throughout the collection I'll be using to paint the remaining 8 founding chapters, with a new chapter being painted or a new assault intercessor being painted every time we get either duplicate issues. For example, we'll be getting 2 issues containing assault marines, and so one of those will be one chapter and another one will be for another chapter, and then issues where we get paints or something that I can't really do much with, we'll get another chapter out of that as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get all 9 chapters in. But for now, Ultramarines. So, starting with a white undercoat, I'm first going to apply a few thin coats of Macragge blue. Now, you can make this easier if you buy the Games Workshop spray paint, Macragge blue. Obviously, you prime it in that, and then just give it a single slightly thin down coat of this one, as the can tends to stick out a little bit different to the paint. So you give it a thin down coat of this, and then that way if you need to do any touching up, you use the pot of paint and it will be a match. So yeah, coat everything that is going to be blue in blue, and all I'm going to leave in the white is the areas that will be black, and the areas basically anything that is going to be black and not blue. Now, the reason I'm using a white undercoat for this rather than black, or you could use grey, but rather than black, is the darker the undercoat, the darker the result. And for Macragge blue, you want a little bit more of a pastely blue, rather than a sort of a deep, rich blue. So yeah, I'm going to get on with this, get him all nice and blue, and then we'll come back and take a look at the next step. So once I've got a nice even coverage of the Macragge blue, I'm now taking some Abaddon black, and I'll be applying this to anywhere that is going to be black, gold or silver, or brown leather, anything like that. So essentially everything else except the solid plate armour is going to have a black coat on it. Now, whilst I'm doing the body, you'll notice that I've got the backpack, or the power pack, separate. That's so that I can paint behind that on the body, as well as the underside or inside of the power pack as well. But I am doing it the exact same method and at the same time as I'm doing this. It's just easier to show you on the model rather than it is on the backpack. So the areas that are going to be black, or any kind of, what we're going to paint black at this stage, is going to be the pistol, the sword, and including the handle, the shoulder guard trim, as they are going to be gold and that goes better over black, his chest emblem, the Aquila, as well as the under armour pieces that you see sort of behind his knees, or in his butt area, inside the elbows, the armpits, things like that. So yeah, you'll notice the belt buckle there I have left white. I completely forgot to paint that blue. I was counting it as part of the belt and it was going to be black, but no, that is supposed to be blue as well. But the belt strap itself is black. So if you're following along, make sure that you painted the belt buckle blue as well. Right, so once all the black is dry, it's now time to go in and paint the silver metallic areas. So the paint I'm using is Lead Belcher. as it has a bit more of a darker, grimier metallic look rather than something like Mithril Silver. I think that was the name of it. Oh, Stormhost Silver. Obviously is a bit too bright and shiny. We want something a little bit more dull, so Lead Belcher works pretty well for this. So the areas that I'll be doing this are obviously the teeth of the chainsword, the vent grill piece that you can see goes around the handle here, as well as the pommel for the handle, and also the barrel of the bolt pistol, so the front part, the magazine bit that goes into it, and then some of the back detailing that sits on the top of his hand of the pistol. Any other areas are the power pack. He has the two vents, just the circular parts, the small parts, not the actual bulbous blue bit on top, and also the 4 little vents that come out either side at the bottom. And then, as you can see here, the trim for the pistol pouch. So with all of the base colours down except for the gold, I'm now giving the model a wash of Nuln Oil. Now what I'm doing is applying this fairly thin over the whole model, just to stain the blue slightly, give it a little bit of a darker tint, and I'm letting it pool in some of the recesses. What I'll do on areas where there's sort of panel markings and panel lines and stuff, I'll allow it to pool a little bit more in those to give it some definition. The step down on the feet, all around different various panels and such, I'll let this pool, and obviously that'll add a little bit of shading in those areas. I'll then set the model aside for about 15 minutes to fully dry, whilst keeping an eye on it within the first couple of minutes, just to make sure that there isn't too much following the line of gravity and flowing towards the bottom of the model. Obviously you don't want it flowing and sitting down at the base of each area, as you're going to end up with a big dry blob of black there, and that's not what we're looking for. Okay, so once the black has dried, it's back to the Macragge blue. Again, thinned down a little bit, maybe even a little bit more than it was previously, and I'm going to build this up in a couple of layers. So you can see here we can't quite see it making too much of a difference, but a second layer over that will bring it back to the Macragge blue. Now I'm being careful not to paint into any of the recesses that I've put the shadow in, or the ink wash. And what I'm doing is, you can see, just slightly fading it into the underside here, where it will go a little bit thinner and leave it a little bit darker, just to give a little bit of shadow within that area. And then obviously a couple of heavier layers over the sort of the upper side where the light will hit more, and you'll get a slightly brighter blue. Okay, so next up I've got a 2-part mix of Teclis blue and 1 part of Calgar blue, and obviously I've mixed those parts together to get somewhere in between. And all I'm doing now is very carefully going around the entire model and giving a slightly thick edge highlight to everything. I don't like to do really prominent highlights. Me personally, I prefer the more subtle ones with just a little bit of a brighter shine in areas. So this 2-to-1 mix keeps it a little bit towards the Calgar blue, the Macragge blue, but slightly paler in tone, and this will be the foundation for our brighter highlights to come. So yeah, use this mix and just very carefully line around the edge of everything that has an edge. Right, and following up over those highlights, I will then take some Fenrisian Grey and just on the uppermost parts of the model, mainly focusing on the corners or sort of very sort of sharpest edges. I'll give one final highlight. You can see here very finely, very short areas, just to pick off where the light would hit the most for that last bit of edge highlight. I will also use the Fenrisian Grey to paint in the shoulder pads embossment, so the chapter marking and I think they're unit designation markings or whatever it is, the X on the other shoulder pad. Yeah, I'll use that as the base colour for the white that those will be. Right, so with the blue all done, I'm now moving on to the black areas, and for this I'm using some Eshin Grey and again the finer brush, and I'm just going around all of the black areas and highlighting them with the Eshin Grey. So for example, the under armour here will get a fairly thick line, just to make it a little bit more towards the grey rather than black, and then the chainsword and the bolt pistol or the heavy bolt pistol will get an edge highlight of this all the way around the edges, just as we did with the Teclis blue or the 2 to 1 Teclis blue, Calgar blue mix, whatever the blues I used, those mix, same thing. So a fairly thick highlight that we can then put a finer one into afterwards. And for that finer edge highlight, I've just mixed up a small amount of Fenrisian Grey with the Eshin Grey, as this will give obviously a mid-tone. You could use Dawnstone, but the Fenrisian Grey has a slightly blue tint to it, which I like with the Eshin Grey. So again, very carefully just going around the edges and giving them another fine highlight. Right, and that is the blues and the blacks done. And now on to the gold. So for the shoulder pauldrons here, the trim, I'm using Retributor armor for all of the gold. It's a nice bright gold. Now the shoulder markings for Ultramarines, or the shoulder trim, shows what company they are from. So depending on what company you want your Ultramarines in, you will obviously change the colours. I do believe gold is for possibly second company. I cannot remember. I'm not an Ultramarines player, so I do apologise. But I like the gold look for Ultramarines. I think the alternative to it is yellow, possibly. It's been a while since I painted Ultramarines. But yeah, so Retributor armour over the trim, and also the Aquila on the chest piece, and also his chainsword hand has the little cross on there. I don't know why they use a cross, but they've got a crucifix type thing there, so obviously I'll paint that as well. Right, so to shade the gold, I'm just using some Reichland Flesh Shade Gold. Sorry, gloss, not gold, Reichland Flesh Shade Gloss, and applying this all over, making sure that it obviously gets into these the recesses with a little bit of pooling, and that will settle down nicely. Now the reason I use the gloss version of this is it does remain shiny. Obviously the gold, we want to have that shine to it, so the gloss does work a little bit better. I'll then obviously let that dry for about 10 to 15 minutes and then come back to some highlighting. And said highlighting will be done first with a mix of Retributor armour and Auric armour gold, about a 50-50 mix, just applied to obviously the edges all around, and to slightly brighten up some of the more flat surface areas where the light will hit sort of more from direct above. Obviously with the Aquila I'll apply this to the sort of the outside tips of each feather, and just come in a little bit towards the skull in the center, or you know, the next layer of feather. And yeah, just take your time, nice and sharp point on the brush, and just like I say, add that edge highlight, or a thicker headlight, tongue twister. So a slightly thicker edge highlight on the edges. There we go, we got it. I'll then follow that up as we did with the blues as we got brighter, with just the Auric armor gold, and do a very fine edge highlight on the uppermost parts of the gold areas. Okay, so next moving on to the leather pouches and pistol pouch now. Again, just keeping the model nice and clean and simple for this, pretty much towards a parade ready standard. So I'm just using some Mornfang brown and going over all of this. Now with it having a black undercoat, it's going to appear a little darker than obviously if we did it over white, which is why I did go with the Abaddon black beforehand. So again, fairly slightly thinned down paints, and then a nice couple of coats, get it nice and even over this. Now if you wanted to leave a little bit of highlighting or shadow, sorry, you can just miss the or stop just before the edges, before coming into contact with the edge itself, and that will leave a little bit of the black undertone in that recess area, which will save you having to use any kind of shade. Right, so next up I'll add a little bit of texture and detail with the edge highlighting on this, and all I've done is with a little bit of Scrag brown, just going around and edge highlighting, but you can see that I'm almost stippling, sort of very sort of dotty coming down those edges, and this gives a little bit more of a broken highlight just to represent sort of, you know, chipped and chafed leather a little bit, sort of worn down leather. So obviously I'll go around all of the leather areas and do this. And then to finish off the leather, I've mixed up a little bit of Kislev flesh and Scrag brown to get a slightly sort of more flesh brown colour. And again, you can see I'm just what I'll call stipple highlighting, some scratches and, you know, textures and stuff into the leather edges. It's important that you don't overdo this. You just want some you know, just a few around the edges of the leather. The more you do, the more worn up and beaten the leather is going to look. I'll then finish that off with a very small amount of just the Kislev flesh, just to add some very last edge highlights, just to represent the leather that's worn through to the paler colour that you can sometimes get under leather. Okay, so moving on to the last of the details now, the lenses, or the eye lenses. For this I'm just taking some Evil Sun's Scarlet and a nice fine point brush, and just very carefully painting the lenses in. I'm not going for anything super complicated with this, so all I'll do is get the red in there. I'll then let that dry, apply a wash of Nuln oil, just a small amount in each eye lens, and this will sort of sit into the recess around the lens, and darken it all up. I'll then go back in and just add a very fine dot of the Evil Sun's Scarlet back at the front of the lens, and then a very small dot of white towards the back of the lens, and that will be the lens is done. And then finally, moving on to the shoulder pauldrons, I'm just taking some white scar and very carefully going over the Fenrisian grey that I had already applied down. The reason I did the Fenrisian grey over the top before the white was just so that I wouldn't have to use so many white layers of white to get it nice and clean. If you use a paler colour below it, then it usually gives it, you can get white a lot quicker than if you were going, say, straight over a dark blue or a black or something. And there he is, one completed Ultramarine Assault Intercessor. So I hope you guys like the look of the finished model, and I really do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button, and if you want to leave comments, feedback, anything like that, let me know down in the comment section below. In fact, let me know what you guys are painting your armies as for the chapter, or for the magazine, and we can see what sort of the more popular armies are amongst you guys. But that is all for today. Thank you ever so much for joining me. If you are not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. If you have recently subscribed, a big warm welcome to the inner circle to you. Thank you for your support in subscribing. But until next time guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.